Hey guys, welcome back to Legally Live. I'm your host, McKinley Molasaw, criminal defense attorney in Austin, Texas. Today we are going to talk about the day 6 recap of the state of Texas versus Kaitlin Armstrong trial. I have been in the court for most of the trial and have been doing recaps on my channel. So if you're unfamiliar, go back and start at day 1. For now, let's go ahead and get into day 6. So if you are unfamiliar, you should go to the end of day 5 if you're unfamiliar with what I'm about to talk about. But at the end of day 5, we were done with Brian Bell, the witness for Strava, which is the app that all the riders were using to track their rides, their bike rides. And he was done. He had been released from testifying. But on day 6 in the morning, the state, in a surprising move, recalled Brian Bell to the stand. And the reason that they called him back to the stand was because they wanted him to clarify some of his previous testimony, specifically regarding the information in column H, which I think was the user agent column. And in that column, it had the device name for the device that the person accessing the information was using. And then it had a space and then a number, comma, and another number. And the specific instance that the defense got Brian Bell to talk about was in a certain row. It said, in that particular column, it said iPhone space 10, comma, and then another number. I think it was like 4 or something. And so on cross-examination, they had gotten Brian Bell to say that that meant that it was accessed from an iPhone and the model number was a 10. And the state kind of didn't seem to agree with that or seemed a little confused on redirect, but he stuck with that answer. So the next day he comes in and he says, yeah, he wants to change that. He had questions after he testified. So he went and he thought he was thinking about it. He went ahead and called a programming engineer from Strava, and he learned that he was actually not, since he's not an expert at data or computer well, I guess no, they didn't offer him as an expert, but since he's not an expert and he's like definitely not an expert on computer programming or engineering, he's not the correct person to testify about the information in the user agent column or what specifically those numbers stand for. You have to ask somebody else at Strava about that information. So, but he says all the rest of the testimony, specifically the testimony about Kaitlin Armstrong's profile, Kaitlin Armstrong's athlete ID, accessing Mo Wilson's athlete profile, and then clicking through to the specific race from the day of May 11th, 2022, and then clicking on the actual race to look at the very specific mobile map so that she could see exactly where it took off and ended. All of that testimony was still reliable and correct. So on cross, of course, the defense attorney, I think it was Jeremy Celestine, I think is how you say his name, he did a great job of questioning, really challenging the reliability of the data and the credibility of the witness. If you remember, this was the witness's first time to testify, though, and I think that was very clear. But it did really call into question if this was really the right guy to call to testify. The defense also made a point of letting the jury know that the state was aware of the programming engineer at Strava, that they could have contacted, they could have subpoenaed them and had them testify at trial to really clear up exactly what that data in that column meant, right? Somebody who could have testified to that, somebody who was an expert at that specific data, but they decided for whatever reason not to call that person. Instead, they called Brian Bell, who could not testify to that. So they wanted the jury to know that and understand that, and I think they likely did. There was some redirect from the state And I basically just summed up what the state said. They just wanted to make it clear that he was not intentionally misinforming the court, right? So then the state next called Katie Connor from APD Homicide. She testified that she was not the first or the secondary detective on this case. She said that there were at least 6 detectives that worked this case involving the death of Anna Moriah Mo Wilson, and that on 5/12 she showed up to her regular shift at headquarters, and at that time Detective Spittler was interviewing Colin in a separate interview room, and she listened in and watched in by putting the interview on a television in the conference room, and she started assisting in video canvassing in the areas around the places that Colin was mentioning. She says at some point it started to develop that somebody really needed to go out and talk with Kaitlin Armstrong. And the reason that she gave for this was that the TAC Intel team that was doing surveillance outside of Colin's while they were interviewing Colin had located a dark SUV with an unusual bike rack similar to the one that had been spotted in the Ring doorbell cameras that was in the scene of the crime, circling from the night before at the time in question, right? So they had asked Colin about it in an interview, and he said that it was Caitlin's vehicle. So, and I think he also said that I think they had already learned about Kaitlin having some kind of jealousy issues with Mo. They also knew about the gun. So they decide they need to talk to her. Well, somebody working on this case discovered that Kaitlin had an outstanding Class B warrant for theft of service. So the decision was made to go out and pick her up and bring her into the station for questioning, and that is exactly what happened. So at this point in the testimony, the state moves to introduce the interview or interrogation video of Armstrong and Connor, and the state objects. It got overruled, and it is entered into the evidence, or it's admitted into evidence over their objection. Uh-oh. Let's see here. Uh-oh. Let's see if I can share this. These are tweets from, I don't even know how you say his last name, but his first name is Alex, and I've been following him during this trial. He's from News Nation, and that's his Twitter handle, AL Caprari 23. Anyway, he's very good. And so I just thought I would bring this up so that we can maybe follow along. But Kaitlin was brought into APD headquarters for interrogation, and Spittler was interrogating Strickland in another interview room. And so since he was tied up, Connor was the one that was going to be doing the interview of Armstrong. When the video first starts, you see Kaitlin come in. This is really distracting me. But you see Kaitlin come in, and she's in handcuffs with her hands behind her back. She's led in by a male officer, and she is immediately patted down. Her hands remain behind her back, and she's told to go sit in an orange chair in the corner, and she does so. As she's sitting down, she still has her hands behind her back in cuffs, and she asks the officer something about, like, why, do I have to keep these behind my back? He says he'll go check on it, and a few minutes later, or very shortly thereafter, Connor comes back in with that guy and says, hey, let's get those cuffs off of you. She testifies that the reason that she wanted to get the cuffs off Kaitlin was so that Kaitlin would be more comfortable for the interview. She gets those cuffs taken off, and she asks Kaitlin if she wants something to drink. Kaitlin asks for water, and Connor returns with a bottle of water. She says she'll be right back, and then it is a very long time before she returns. So Kaitlin sits down in the chair in the corner, and she appears to be very calm. She is sitting with her legs crossed, one hand on top of the other, very still. She has her hair in that famous braid that we keep seeing in all of the evidence in the trial. And she has on a green sleeveless top, and she has on some kind of intricate leggings and flip-flops. She does eventually, her hands are laying like this, but she does eventually start to look at her wrists from where she was cuffed. And then she just returns back to one hand on top of the other. When Connor does come back in to the interview room, she says that her partner is just she says her partner is tied up in another room. She makes sure and says that the partner is tied up in the other room talking to Colin, and that she just wanted to come in and chat so that Kaitlin doesn't have to stay there super long, and that they'll get through it really fast, right? Then she starts questioning, basically, right? So they start the interview, and she says she wants to like differentiate between Kaitlin being there for a warrant, right? So she tells her like, you're so apparently you're here for a warrant. Do you know why you're here? Or do you know what that's about? And Caitlin's like, no, not at all. I have no idea. Can you give me more information? It turns out that Connor really doesn't have any information. She doesn't know anything besides the fact that it is a Class B warrant for theft of service. And Caitlin's like, well, what is the service that I stole? And Connor has no idea. She has no idea. So that's like clue number one. They brought you in not to talk about the warrant, right? You are there for something else. Don't talk, however. And it actually seems like Kaitlin is very determined to keep the focus of the conversation on the warrant. But at some point after Connor informs Kaitlin that she's going to have to read her rights because of the warrant, Kaitlin asks if she needs an attorney there. Well, after the first time that she asks if she needs an attorney or says she feels like she needs an attorney, there's a knock at the door, and eventually Connor is pulled out. And when she comes back in, she announces that that the date of birth was wrong on the warrant, and so Caitlin's actually not under arrest anymore. Well, Kaitlin starts to question that. She gets a little upset, and she's like, so y'all just arrested me for no reason. And eventually she is told that, well, yeah, you're free to leave, right? And so she says she wants to leave, and it kind of sounds like Connor's surprised by that, which this cannot be the first person that's wanted to leave when they're told they're free to leave, right? But you would think that might stop Connor once she finds out that Kaitlin actually wants to leave, but she doesn't stop. She just like keeps on and you know, is trying to pit Colin against Kaitlin, right? Like trying to make it look like Colin is just in there really selling her out, that they have information, because he's in there saying that she has more information about the situation. Eventually asks her, do you know what's going on? And Kaitlin says, like, Colin came in and told me that somebody from the community passed away. And then Connor tells her, like, yeah, you know, we really think you might have more information. And it seems like, I don't know, you know, maybe Colin had like gone somewhere with this woman, and maybe you were just angry and you were just in the area or something like that. And that it seems like she told her that she thought she was jealous and angry with Mo, right? And that her car had been in the area, and it doesn't look too good. And at that point, you do actually see Kaitlin nod her head up and down, right? And like in agreement that it doesn't look too good that her car is there. Connor says, like, you know, it would be better if we had your side of the story. You know, it would be better for you. Does that make sense? And Caitlin's like, I suppose, but she also says, like, in reference to Colin saying things about her being jealous, she's like, I don't even know what he could be referring to, because I wasn't even aware that he had gone out with her or was going out with her as of present. And then she ends up asking for an attorney 3 times, and she asks to leave this interview room 5 times, right? When the interview finally comes to an end, it's when the detective actually just like point blank asks her what she was doing the night before. And at that point, Caitlin's like, I want to leave. And so then she's told, like, okay, well, sit tight because we actually can't just have people walking around on their own up here. I have to go get somebody to escort you. And Kaitlin also asks about getting a ride home because, just a reminder, she arrived at headquarters via a lift from the officers in the back of the car, handcuffed, right? Because she was arrested. But she's no longer under arrest because they think they have the wrong date of birth. And that's also the reason that they didn't continue on with the Miranda rights or the Miranda warnings, right? So that's the end of the interview. And then the state goes on to question Connor about specific clips on this video. And I think I've pretty much gone over all of them, but the state is just wanting to make it clear that that Kaitlin was picked up on a warrant, but then the warrant turned out to not be a valid warrant. And so the detective was no longer required to Mirandize Kaitlin. So that's the reason that she wasn't read her warnings. And that they also were not required to stop questioning completely whenever Kaitlin mentioned that she wanted an attorney, because it wasn't, that might actually come up on, I think that comes up on cross. Okay, so they just want to make it clear that they didn't need to Mirandize her, and they also want to make it clear that Kaitlin's body language was suspicious, right? So Connor says that whenever she's telling Kaitlin like that that Colin has said she's jealous or has a problem with Mo, she says that she's the only one that can see it. Like, we can't see it watching the video, but she can see it because she's sitting across from Kaitlin, but that Kaitlin like rolls her eyes in an angry manner and that it stuck out to her. She knows for certain it happened because it's the only time in the interview that Kaitlin showed any emotion. Up until this point, she had been devoid of emotion. And I find it interesting because I was sitting very close to the monitor on my side of the courtroom. And so I looked very closely during this portion of the interview, and I could see almost the entire right side of her face. I could clearly see her right eye, and I did not see her eye roll at all. It's possible that she only rolled her left eye. I've never seen that before, but it's possible. But I definitely couldn't see her eye rolling. So I don't know. Then the next body language that she says was suspicious was that when she is telling Kaitlin, they kind of say she confronts Kaitlin with the fact that her car was in the area the night of the murder. They don't really confront her with it, as in like they don't play her the ring video that shows a car similar to hers in the area. No, she just kind of like slips it in there in the, maybe you were just in the area. You know, that's the extent of it. But when and then she says, it kind of makes it look not too good that your car is in the area. And at that point, Kaitlin does nod her head up and down. But I think that yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good, right? She's nodding her head up and down to, it doesn't look too good that your car's in the area. And then when Connor says that, you know, it would be better if we had your side of the story, so it's not just Colin's side of the story that we're getting. Does that make sense? Kaitlin says, I guess. But then the state says, so she says, I guess, but does she actually give you her side of the story? And the answer is no. No, she doesn't. She asks for an attorney and she asks to leave, which you are allowed to do. You're definitely allowed to do that. I think the problem is that Kaitlin shouldn't have said anything at all, ever. She should have said she wanted an attorney and then not said anything else. When you nod, any kind of like any facial expressions or body language they will use and they will hold it against you. You can't nod. You can't do anything. You have to very clearly and unequivocally state your want for an attorney, like you're not going to continue without an attorney. You need to make that known and then absolutely don't answer any questions. But the problem is she kind of keeps getting dragged back into the conversation here. And so the state asks, why is it you think that so they ask, she is saying that she wants to leave, but does she ever get up and go towards the door and try to leave? And the detective is like, no, oh no, she doesn't, like I tell her she's free to leave. She's totally free to leave. And she says she wants to leave, but she never moves. She sits very still. She never makes a move for the door. And the door was unlocked. Okay, but the door was closed. Okay, maybe it's unlocked, but it was closed for sure. And they say, why do you think that is? That she keeps asking, or she keeps saying she wants to leave, but then she doesn't actually get up and leave. And Connor says that she believes that it's because Kaitlin is wanting to see how much information Connor has without giving any information to Connor. So she's like, she wants to know what Connor has against her, right? Without having to say anything. And that, I don't know, that seems like very speculative, but whatever. That is what she says. And then on cross, the defense is like, once starts questioning her about the actual orders from APD that tells them what they're supposed to do in these situations. And it sounds like that there is a specific order addressing what to do when a defendant expresses their desire for legal representation. And I think that the defense says like that you're supposed to cease all interrogation at that time. And what Connor says is, no, that's not true, because what Kaitlin actually said is, I feel, and that's not clear and unequivocal, which is what the case law and our department policy requires. So she then says that Kaitlin is free to leave, and that they do get her, however, on direct to admit that when Kaitlin finally does leave, she actually has to have an escort. And if she had gotten up and headed towards the door to leave through the unlocked door, she still they would have required an escort. That's why they tell her to sit tight. They don't actually let her leave right then. So it's not like she can just get up and leave the building, She has to have an escort all the way through back to the police car, because that's who's going to give her a ride home. And let's see here. Then we bring in evidence, right? So they ask Connor about evidence that she gained subsequent to the interview that led her to believe that Kaitlin had been untruthful. And she talked about the GPS evidence showing that Caitlin's car had actually been in the area. And also, she says, phone and social media evidence that shows that Kaitlin was aware that Colin and Mo were hanging out like recently that night. And I'm not sure that we ever did get actual evidence, like proof that they were hanging out, that Kaitlin knew that they were hanging out. I know even all through this trial, like we have heard a lot that Kaitlin was viewing his messages from his like laptop or his iPad or something, but I haven't actually seen any of that evidence. So I don't know. But then the state moves to introduce some evidence, which is photos of Caitlin's things when she was brought back from Costa Rica. There's a suitcase with a bag with miscellaneous items. There's an AVA surgical receipt in the amount of $6,350. The patient name is Allison Page, and the doctor is Dr. Jorge Padilla. There's a prescription, like the little script, like the doctor's pad script with medications on it from that same doctor, Dr. Badia, and it's made out to Allison Page. There's a boarding pass from New Jersey to San Jose, Costa Rica, and it's in Christine Armstrong's name. So her sister's name, and it's dated 5/18. There's a wallet with multiple cards, multiple health cards. They're all in Kaitlin's name. There's more cards, a driver's license, a social security card, credit cards, all in Kaitlin's name. There's a debit and credit cards. There's another photo of a bunch of debit and credit cards that are all in Kaitlin's name except for one, which is in Colin Strickland's name. There's a net spend card ending in 3662 that just lets you spend money without being tracked, basically. And there is a piece of paper with Brian Rourke's phone number written on it, and then the name Jason Snell, maybe, I think, with no phone number. And apparently Brian Rourke is a criminal defense attorney in Austin. And apparently Jason is also an attorney in Austin, but because I looked him up, that's the reason I know. But I don't think he's a criminal defense attorney. I could be wrong about that, but I don't know. Then there is a photo of Christine Armstrong's passport. Then the next item of evidence is a picture of the Costa Rica stamp from 5/18 on Christine's passport. Then there's a picture of Kaitlin's passport without the Costa Rica stamp where they say it should be. Then there's an assortment of medications. One is an actual prescription with Kaitlin Armstrong's name on it. Then there is a cell phone. Then there's 2 SIM cards. And there are 2 receipts from Walmart dated May 13th. I think that's the last day she was in Austin. And they are from a Walmart on Ben White Boulevard in Austin. One's for a debit card that was for $500. So she filled up a debit card with $500. And then the other one's for a cell phone. And the amount of that receipt was $449. Then there is a photo of an assortment of U.S., Costa Rican, and Mexican currencies. There's a picture showing 5 $100 US bills. There's a COVID vaccine card with Kaitlin Armstrong's name. And there's luggage with clothing inside. Then the next thing that the state introduces through Connor is the driver's license photos of Kaitlin Armstrong and Colin Strickland. And the reason was these were the persons of interest photos that APD pulled up whenever they were persons of interest. And so those get introduced into evidence. Next, we see States 400, which is a sealed bag of evidence. Connor confirms the chain of evidence and then opens the bag. Inside, the first thing that she pulls out is Kaitlin Armstrong's passport. The state has her turn to the page where the Costa Rica stamp would be, and there is no Costa Rica stamp. Then the second thing she pulls out is a passport belonging to Christine Armstrong, turns to the page where the Costa Rica stamp is, and it is there and dated 5/18. The prosecutor walks along in front of the jury like a teacher showing a book, and very slowly shows both passports, right? One after the other, but first shows the photo page of the passport and then shows on Kaitlin's, the page that should have a Costa Rica passport stamp that doesn't. And on Christine's, the Costa Rica stamp that has the 5/18 stamp on it. The next thing that's pulled out is a driver's license in Kaitlin Armstrong's name, a social security card in Caitlin's name, a boarding pass in Christine Armstrong's name, a California driver's license in Kaitlin Armstrong's name, an application for U.S. passport in Armstrong's name, and some immigration papers that apparently Connor can't read because they were in Spanish and they were for Costa Rica. I think I already did cross on accident somehow. Anyway, cross should go right now. But now, okay, so we went over Cross earlier. Sorry about that. But Cross is whenever they get her to admit that Kaitlin wasn't really free to leave, or as free as she made it sound on direct, right? Because she had to have an escort even outside the door of the interview room. And mind you, I would also like y'all to know that Caitlin's back is literally in the corner of this interview room. She's like at the furthest corner of the interview room. Then in between her and the detective is like a wooden table. And between her and the door, so between her and the door is a wooden table and a detective with a gun on her hip. So yeah, Kaitlin didn't get up and run towards the door, you know? Like, that would be crazy. You could get shot. But also, like, where was she going to go if she got outside of the door? She can't walk around because she's not allowed to walk around without an escort. On top of that, she can't really, like, leave once she gets downstairs because it's 6 miles, I guess, from her house, and she has on flip-flops. Like, she has to have a ride. She was driven there in the back of the car. So, kind of silly. And then on redirect, we get the state just has her go back over the circumstances that raised her suspicion. Oh, because on cross, the defense was like, you know that you're not supposed to hold somebody's refusal to cooperate in an interrogation or an investigation against them. And she's like, I didn't say it was just her refusal to talk to me during the interview. It was all the circumstances combined that led me to be suspicious of her. So the state now has her clarify, and she says, yeah, there were other things that raised my suspicion: the car in the area that matched hers, the jealousy issues with Mo. She had a gun, and a gun killed Mo. And then the state says, okay, so did you have probable cause for an arrest at this point? And she says, no, I still didn't have probable cause for an arrest. So the next person to get on the stand and testify is Michael Allen, and he is a U.S. Secret Service agent. He does Celebrite and Gray Key, right? I think specifically he uses Gray Key for this case. So on the stand, he says that he is asked by Spittler in this case to unlock a iPhone 11. And so he's contacted by APD to brute force open an iPhone 11 Pro. And Gray Key is he says hardware software that you use to brute force open this type of phone. He received the phone and he performed a brute force and extracted whatever data was on there to be extracted. And then he really didn't do anything further. On cross, he got a report and he handed it over to Detective Spittler, and then he really didn't do anything else. When the defense questions him on cross, they actually start questioning him about the infotainment center that is evidence in this case. However, he did not specifically look at the infotainment center. Somebody else did, right? And I think we already got evidence that Spittler actually went and removed the infotainment center on his own from this vehicle. Well, the defense asks him if the Secret Service does infotainment centers, and the state had just spent a really long time establishing that Secret Service was like the go-to agency in all things, in anything that they're involved in, really, like the best of the best. And then defense really hammers away at that, like, you're the best of the best, so shouldn't this have gone to y'all? But he gets Allen to say that yes, they do actually perform extractions on infotainment centers, and that he does believe that they are the best of the best, and that their standard operating procedures would require that somebody from Secret Service remove the infotainment center so that they know that it's been removed correctly, so that it doesn't short circuit or isn't damaged upon removal, right? And they remove them according to the manufacturer's guidances. So then on redirect, the state clarifies that, like, APD isn't actually supposed to send you guys all of their extractions or all of their, like, tech work, correct? And he's like, no, I guess not. And then they actually want him to say whether or not he has reason to believe that APD is unqualified or that their lab is inadequate to perform this extraction on the infotainment center. And Alan's like, I wouldn't know. I've never seen it, which I thought was awesome. Then the state says, okay, well, when you have seen damage to an infotainment center, the situation hasn't been that you have gotten like new data that was placed on the infotainment center, like it didn't come up with new GPS coordinates. The situation is that you just don't get data, right? And he says, yes. So it's like it's a quantity, not a quality issue that you would be encountering if there was damage done to the infotainment center. Like you would ruin it and it couldn't be extracted at all. The next witness on the stand for the state is Amir Perez. He's a deputy with the U.S. Marshal Service, and he is part of fugitive apprehension. He was contacted on 5/18 and started working the case on 5/19. He started off by going around in Austin and questioning people, but eventually he realized that she had gone outside of the Austin area. So they started focusing their investigation elsewhere. Eventually, the investigation led him to Costa Rica. He flew out there to assist local authorities in what he called old-fashioned police work, which he said involved a lot of going around and asking questions. He says eventually this investigation, after he got to Costa Rica, focused on a small town called Santa Teresa, and that it was a very tiny town with one road, very touristy, on the Western Peninsula in an area easier reached by ferry. He said that they went around questioning bartenders, hotel workers, people at hostels, and store workers. They went to a surf competition looking for Kaitlin, but it was super awkward because they ended up all the people there to watch the competition were looking out at the surfers, and they were looking at all the people looking at the surfers. He also says that they did beach surveillance. And then finally, on the 29th, which is like 6 days or something, right? That's a long time for a one road town. That it should take you that long to find out where she is. There can't be that many people there, right? He might have been doing a little bit of vacationing. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. But that is a long time, it seems like to me. Anyway, on the 29th, he got info that she could be at, and I've heard it on the stand, he was saying Don John Hostel, but then I think I saw it somewhere else, Don Juan Hostel. So we'll just say the hostel. But he got information that she was there. So between 4 and 4:30 on the 29th, he went to that hostel and he approached a man and a woman that were talking outside of the closed hostel office. He says that he approached them and he started talking to them in Spanish. And eventually the woman pulled out her phone and started responding using Google Translate. He says at first he was unsure of who he was talking to because she looked so different than he was expecting. And the reason being because she had a bandage on her nose, she had a swollen lip, and her hair was a lot darker than the pictures he had seen. He said eventually, though, as he started to talk to her more, he was able to move closer and was able to identify her based on her eyes. And at that time, he finished his conversation and then he went and notified local authorities that Kaitlin was there. He says that at first, the lead agency on this case in Costa Rica had been immigration. The reason being because she entered the country on a passport that did not belong to her sister's passport, which is a crime. It breaks their immigration laws in that country. So it's a crime there and it got immigration involved, right? But because it was COVID, immigration was eventually sent back to San Jose. But before they left this tiny town, they told the local authorities that they were looking for Kaitlin. They gave the local authorities all the information about Kaitlin and let them know that if she was found, they wanted her arrested for them. So the the deputy says he was, hold on. Okay, so I don't even actually know where we were. I'm going to have to try to figure that out. So I'll tell y'all a little secret. Today is actually the 16th, and today was closing arguments and the verdict watch. And so I did the live stream this morning of the closing arguments over on Legal Bites channel. And I decided to come back and record this while we were waiting on the verdict. And I thought it was going to be a quick verdict, but it was way faster than I even thought. And so while I was sitting here doing this recap, I got a message. That's why I squealed a moment ago. And I actually missed the verdict. I'm not going to tell you what it was in this video, but I made it over there for her verdict live stream and got to finish out the live stream with her. So that was great. Go out there and check out that channel. And also, I have been doing recaps nightly on Making Law Simple and Valhalla. I think it's Valhalla Awaits maybe, but I'm going to put their links in the description. And you should go over there and check out their nightly recaps. And Legal Bites has recaps that are very concise and nice edited versions that are not live streams of each day. And you should check those out. They all have great information. Anyway, I'm going to pause this for a second while I find my place. Okay, so we're back to, I know where we were. We were on the U.S. Marshal, and he had gone and he had told the local authorities, and they had been told that they needed to arrest her for immigration if she was found. And so he went and he told to them, hey, I found her. His name's Amir Perez. And so later he watched from across the street as his partner, and the local authorities went in and they arrested Kaitlin. She was eventually taken to the local station, and Amir Perez and his partner asked her if she was Kaitlin Armstrong, and eventually she did say yes. The state does ask him about this, though, how many aliases was she using? And I believe he said she was using 3 to 4. And I know 2 of them that she was using were, okay, so she was using Allison Page as one of them, and then Ari Roberts was another one that she had been using. And the other ones I'm not really sure about. I mean, maybe Christine Armstrong was one of them. And I'm not really sure which ones he was talking about or referring to as the other ones. Then he says then she was sent over to the mainland, right? And from there, so she was sent to the mainland by ferry, and from there she was sent to San Jose. He was not there. San Jose is the capital of Costa Rica, and it is also where the airport is, where they would eventually leave, and it's where immigration is headquartered. He says he was not present for the immigration processing, but he was given a document by immigration, and he speaks Spanish, and so the state has him go ahead and introduce this document into the evidence, and it's admitted. He reads it out, and it says that she was arrested, she had a hearing, and she was being deported. So immigration asked him to take her back to the United States with him. So she actually went with he and his partner back to Houston, which is where they flew into when they went back to the United States, and he handed her over to Customs and Border Patrol agents that were waiting on her at the airport. He said that whenever she flew back, that the only thing that she had on her, he believes, was one bag and a receipt in her pocket, but that a day later, he was sent the rest of her items by immigration. Somebody had gone and rounded them up and sent them over. And immigration also gave them a black suitcase, or put all of her clothes and things into a black suitcase so that they could be transported more easily. He says that On cross, he says that she was polite and friendly but quiet. They ask him if she admitted that she was Kaitlin Armstrong to authorities, and he says he doesn't know. I think he was referring to he doesn't know if she admitted with immigration or not. And then the defense attorney said, well, she did admit it though, right? Whenever you ask her. And then he says, oh, right. Well, when I asked her, yes, she hesitated, but she did eventually admit that she was Kaitlin Armstrong. And then they question the chain of custody for the items which he was sent. They want to know who was the person who collected those items, and then who all had touched those items and how they were sent to him. And he said he didn't know. And then the defense attorneys pointed out that that wouldn't hold up for chain of custody in a federal court or any other U.S. court. And so it really shouldn't hold up for chain of custody in this court. And then on redirect, the state points, well, also they ask him how he knows it was her stuff. And he says, well, everything had her name on it besides the clothes, and everything else I know it's hers because it had her name on it, and they told me it's hers, and this is what I was given. So that's what I turned over. And the state says, so basically you can figure out from common sense that it's hers, and maybe you can't actually confirm or verify that those clothes belong to her. And he agrees. But really, at the end of the day, it's like, the clothes don't matter. You know, it's not like they're testing those for DNA or like some part of, they're not crucial to any part of the state's case that they have to prove here. So it doesn't matter. And having all of the evidence in her custody when she was arrested that has her name on it, has Christine Armstrong's name on it, has Colin Strickland's name on it, and also has Allison Page, and the plastic surgery receipt, you know, a jury might find that to be damning evidence. And I believe on recross, the defense asked him whether or not, like they say, so you actually could have found out who those people were in the chain of custody, but you just chose not to. And he says, I guess. So that is the end of day 6 recap. And like I said, the verdict has actually already come out. And so I am going to work on day 7, 8, and 9. I don't know if anybody actually witnessed. I've done this day 6 recap before, but it had a lot of technical mistakes, might we say. I thought I was going to go with a different approach of like recording and then editing. Let's just say I can't edit. And also, apparently, I can't check my channel to see what I published and what I didn't publish. So if you saw that one, sorry, that's me. That was my attempt. And I obviously didn't mean to publish it, but it's okay. It's okay. That happens. I will add a bunch of links in the description. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this with anybody who you think might be interested. And, you know, come back. I'm going to have the rest of the days of this trial coming up. Thanks, guys.